Hey, everybody, just a quick side note about the interview which you are about to hear, because it will sound differently than what the other episodes sound like here in season 2. This interview that you're about to hear was originally recorded over a year and a half ago on September 26, 2022. The book that you will hear about, 3 Decades Cold, was supposed to be released in February of 2023. But as we know, sometimes when it comes to publishing, everything does not work out that way. So the book that you'll hear us talk about is now available. Again, it is 3 Decades Cold, released on May 23rd, 2024. Just wanted to correct that because at the end of this episode, you will hear me say the original date in which it was supposed to be released. You can find this book now on geniusbooks.com as well as Amazon. And if you are a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you can read 3 Decades Cold for free under your subscription. Even though this episode was shot over a year and a half ago, it still tells you all of the details of 3 Decades Cold, and I know that you guys will enjoy it. So enjoy the episode, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.
You are seen. You are worthy. You are not alone. The world loses one person to suicide every 40 seconds. Let's change the stats. Together, we can say not suicide. Not today.
A successful police officer who started his career as a patrol officer and became a detective in the Special Victims Unit. But when it was time to hang up the badge and the gun, he had so many stories of cases that should never be forgotten that he knew he needed to tell the world. But every time he tried to put pen to paper, nothing ever came out the way that he wanted it. A chance encounter with a very talented writer puts them together to collaborate, and she will help him tell the story of those cases that he came across and how he was in the game for 3 Decades Cold. Join me as I talk with author and detective Chris McMullen and author Maria Viola Jefferson on this episode of True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People.
Welcome to True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People, the podcast where we bring 2 passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction, and reminding you that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. Here is your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Authors. Of course, I am your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already done so, make sure that you follow us on all of our social media channels. One link to a link tree in the show notes will get you everywhere you have to go. All right, so if you've been following the show, looking at your calendars, you know it is yet time again for another author interview. But this time, I have a double treat for you. I got 2 people on today. Let me introduce you to who our guest is. First up, Maria Viola Jefferson is a mother, wife, nurse, filmmaker, and author born to Sicilian immigrant parents. She discovered a love for writing and illustration in the 3rd grade, where she wrote her first book of original poems and entered into a contest. After a 20-year career as a labor and delivery nurse, Maria's sustained passion for writing led to her first self-published children's book, Lefty Lucy for President 2017 is when that was released. This book was inspired by her daughter, signifying the challenges of being left-handed amongst her peers. In 2018, Maria wrote and produced her very first multi-award-winning feature film, Offstage Elements, released in 2018. Offstage Elements is an inspirational drama that converges rock and roll with current-day family issues, including drug and alcohol problems, mental illness, and more. It is currently streaming on demand and can be watched on Amazon Prime, Tubi, Plex, and Apple TV, to name a few. Amid co-writing comedic episodes for a local television show in Palm Springs, Maria continues to write screenplays with hopes to inspire others. And then our second guest today, Mr. Chris McMullen, was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He began his career as a police dispatcher in North Wildwood, New Jersey in 1989. In 1990, he graduated from the Cape May County Police Academy and served as a Class 2 to police officer in North Wildwood, New Jersey, until being appointed to a full-time police officer in the city of Philadelphia in October of 1990. Upon graduation from the Philadelphia Police Academy, he was assigned to the 9th Police District where he served in patrol. On August 20th, 1992, he became a member of the Ben Salem Police Department. He was promoted to the rank of detective in January of 2000 and assigned to the Special Victims Unit where he investigated sex crimes, crimes against the elderly and children, homicide, and cold case homicides. In March of 2022, he retired and was sworn in as a lieutenant with the Bucks County Sheriff's Office. He is a member of both the Vadok Q Society and the Pennsylvania Homicide Investigators Association. Mr. McMullin earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice at DeSales University and is currently earning his master's degree. He is currently working to develop the true crime television series Unsolved Cold Cases with McCool Television Productions. He is the subject and the story, and she is the author of the upcoming book, 3 Decades Cold, which releases in February of 2023. Please welcome to the show, Chris McMullen and Maria Jefferson. Chris and Maria, thank you guys for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, David.
Well, you know, the first thing, Maria, I want to say to you is a lot of my friends I'm going to have to give that book to because I have a lot of friends that I worked with that are left-handed. About 3 of them at one store, and they always give me grief because they are iPhone users and iPad users, and they tell me all the time that they want native controls to change everything left-handed.
Oh, yes. See, there's no love for the left-handed people out there, so we gotta stand up, you know. No, it's a quirky little children's book. It's appropriate mostly for children ages of, 5, school-age children, 5 through 11, 12, 13. So it's a quirky little book about Lucy, who is a left-handed little girl. And in the beginning, when I first released it, there was some confusion about the title, Lefty Lucy for President. And, some people took it as a political vendetta. And it has nothing to do with that. The left side of politics. It's everything to do with just a left-handed little girl who is trying to work her way through being different from her classmates.
So just looking at your history that I read here, you kind of like went all over the place. So you was a nurse and filmmaker, and now you're a writer. So was this always in the back of your mind that you wanted to do this even as you was a nurse? Is this your overall passion?
Yes, this has been an overall passion of mine since a young child. And I distinctively remember writing, I actually created my own short stories and fill-in-the-blank stories during journal time in 5th grade. And we would always we would go into class and have 20 minutes to write about anything that we wanted in our journal. And I thought, I don't want to write about the same boring stuff all over, and then we got to share them at the end. So I started coming up with these stories, these short stories to write in my journal, and I would fill in the blanks. I would do, and then I would share the story with my classmates when it was time, and they loved it. They looked forward to the short story every morning because they would all raise their hands up, and everybody would be trying to fill in the blank in the short story. And, it just became a true passion of mine. And yeah, poetry was a real strong passion of mine at a very young age as well. And it just never leaves you when it's a passion. It just never leaves you. You have breaks, you have, cycles, but it never leaves you. And I think that my writing came to a point in my life where I had significant life experiences to tell these stories about in a way that other people could relate and make sense of it. And so, I think God has a way of giving you a path when it's the right time.
So what I have been able to read so far is written very well.
Thank you.
Chris, you are the subject. This is your story. If you'd have never told me somebody else wrote it, I thought it was all you. How did you and Maria end up getting together to get this project done?
That's funny you say that, because other people that have read it have said that they feel like it's in my words that I'm talking, which is exactly what I wanted, but I couldn't do it. Every time I started trying to write, it looked like a damn police report. So Maria and I met, about 5-6 years ago?
Yeah. Oh, sounds about right.
Yeah, we have a common friend named Bob. Hey, Bob. And we met at an event. And just as, I knew Maria had been a filmmaker, and I've, been in the acting world as well. And I had been trying to write this book, and I had been spinning my wheels. I saw Maria's film. I thought she was a very good writer, and we just got to talking, and I just put it out there. Hey, would you want to collaborate on this? Written by you, story by me, something like that. And here we are, 3 years later.
Well, I will say that, yes, Maria, you did a fantastic job, especially now getting to hear Chris's voice and seeing his mannerisms, applying that to the book. I would have totally thought that you did it. So you guys make a fantastic team.
Thank you.
The one thing I do, since, Chris, that you was a SVU detective at one point, or cop at one point, can you please tell the audience that what we see on TV is not real or as real as they want it to be?
Well, the beauty of television shows is they get evidence processed and off to the lab and results in about 5 minutes. And sadly, that's not the case. Even with today's technology, there is DNA technology called rapid, which is, can be done very quickly. But, when CSI came out years ago, I mean, that really gave people a false illusion as to how quickly things could be done.
Does the TV show SVU even come close to what an SVU or homicide cop would go through?
I think on some level, I mean, there's, I've watched that show plenty of times, and, there's times that I have watched it and I said, yeah, I can identify with that, but it moves too quickly. And that's just because they got to get it in 48 minutes, because they have commercials. But the television show Bosch, I thought, had a real life element to it. I thought that was well written.
Did you tell him you were even on an episode of SVU?
That's true. I was on an episode of SVU. I played a fireman.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
April of 21 it aired. Yeah. It was a good time. I had a couple lines, I was up there for a few days shooting. It was a good time.
So 3 Decades Code is the book that's coming out. It talks a lot about, you being a cold case detective, some of the cases that you wanted to touch, things of that nature. We'll talk about a case here in a minute that has actually been solved. What I would like to know from you and Maria is, first of all, Maria, looking at the extensiveness of the book, I know there's over 15,000 words. It goes through various points. I mean, from the beginning to the end of Chris's career. How much research, how many hours did you have to spend in getting all the information that you got for the book?
Countless hours of research, of weeding through all of the original investigative reports, weeding through that, and meetings, countless meetings with Chris, actually. And it was very important to me as a writer to not only state the facts, but also to put it into his words. And so it's coming from him, and which I'm so glad to hear that it seems like I've accomplished that so far. So lots of hours of taken from the investigative reports and then putting it in literary meanings so it doesn't sound like an investigative report. So it flows like a piece of literature and makes sense and is entertaining. And a lot of times we did, because the pandemic hit during the process of writing the book. And there were many times where I recorded him during our meetings. And that also helped to put things into his words, because I could go back and, put things into his words and then go back and clean things up a little, but yeah, lots of questions, a lot of, back and forth, a lot of meetings with him and going back to the investigative reports as references.
So, Chris, being that this is your story is very personal, you wanted to be as genuine as possible. Did you audition anybody else for the job of writer? Or when you met Maria, did you just say, I know this is it? I
had started writing it with somebody else, but it just, we weren't getting any traction, and so I continued to go it alone. And then not long after that, I teamed up with Maria. And no disrespect to the other writer, we just weren't on the same page. Whereas Maria and I, she was picking up what I was putting down. You know what I mean? She knew what I wanted, and we would share our document on a Google Drive, and I would go in there and write this stuff out in raw form. And then she would take it and polish it up, and I would say, yeah, I like that. This is great. And then can we tweak this? Can we do that? And it was like a volleyball game. We just kept throwing it back and forth to one another, and we would meet, and, we would do our own Zoom meetings, and we didn't rush it, which I think is a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I think even that, at one point I said to him, can you take me on a tour of Barbara Rowan's neighborhood, her home, where she was found, her body was found. I needed to feel connected to her because her story was so significant to myself, and I know to Chris. Not saying that the other stories aren't significant, but that is actually the story we started out with.
Yeah.
There was no intention of putting these other stories in. And so as we were finishing up with the Barbara Rowan case, he would casually mention these other cases, and I'm like, we should put this in the book. And it just led one to the other. Yeah. We
did that with Lisa Todd, but then Mary Beth Hodgkinson came up, and I was like, stop the press. We're not done yet. And
yes.
I was glad about that because I wanted to get that one solved before I retired too. So the timing was great. But I think Maria was going to kill me at one point because I kept saying, slow down.
I wasn't going to kill.
So speaking of that, so in 2002, you decided to take a fresh look at 4 cases. They had already went cold. For those of you guys out there who may not be, down with any type of police speak, or you don't know anything about true crime, a cold case is a case that the police has no trail anymore. They have no more witnesses coming in, and they have no more evidence. So it's cold. They don't know where to go. So you opened up 4 more of those. What made you decide that you wanted to do that at this point in your career?
The truth of the matter was I didn't even know the cases existed at the time. I had been recovering from surgery. I had surgery on my left knee, and I was in a cast and on crutches, and eventually I was allowed to return to work, but I still was in a walking cast, and I couldn't drive. So I was on what they call light duty, and I couldn't do a whole lot. So my sergeant had said to me, why don't you take a look at the Barbara Rowan case? And I, at the time, didn't realize, I didn't think I knew what the Rowan case was. Turns out I did, which we'll get to that later. But I said, tell me about that case. And she had told me about it. Said it was a case from the summer of 1984 where this 14-year-old girl had disappeared. And then 13 days later, her body was found, and the case was never solved. And I said, yeah, I want to see that file. Of course, it wasn't in our computer system. It was in some old dusty binders. And when I got them, I took them home with me. I read through them cover to cover multiple times. And I immediately thought to myself, this case is solvable. I mean, the original investigators did a fantastic job of taking a complete whodunit, and they cast this really wide net, and they narrowed it down to the right people, but they just couldn't put it on them. But they were absolutely on target. And I said, we're gonna pick up where they left off. And I was 32 years old at the time. I said, I don't care if if it takes me 15 years to do this, we're going to do this. And so I said, I'd like to open the case. And I got some naysayers, but I was told I could work on it as long as I kept up with my current caseload. And I did. And after about a year or so of educating myself on the case and seeing, the key players, if they were still alive and where they were, I then cherry-picked some other investigators and a DA to help me with the case. It took us 13 years to make an arrest on it, and then it was almost another 2 years by the time the conviction happened, but that's okay. We got it done. So
now, one of the first cases, which is one of these 4 that you talk about right at the beginning of the book, is Lisa Todd. Now, she was known to you as Publicker Jane Doe. You had watched over her case for 19 years. I would like to know, what was your feeling once you found out who Lisa Todd was after being on that case for so long?
I was at my desk. I jumped up. I started smashing my desk, and, it was like New Year's Eve. I was so thrilled. because I knew that, we had finally given her a name, and I wanted to give her a name. All the cases, had some type of, I guess, significance to me. That one was significant to me because a mentor of mine who had since passed away, Frank Friel, who I mentioned in the book, he had been involved in that case. He was actually director of public safety, and he was actually, which is the equivalent of the chief of police, and he was actually the man that hired me and gave me my job. And he was a member of the VDOC Society, and he had Frank Bender make a forensic sculpture over the skull of Jane Doe to try and determine what she may have looked like in life, and that was released to the media. And Frank Bender had been successful doing that in other cases. And now that we know who she is, if you look at the picture of both Lisa Todd and the sculpture, he was right on. But Frank really took me under his wing, and he had written a book called Breaking the Mob, because he was a Philadelphia cop, and he was very involved in the investigation of the Philadelphia Mafia and during the Nicky Scarfo era. And I still have his book, and I always thought to myself, I was 22 years old at the time, and I thought, I hope when my career's over that I have something that I want to write a book. I just hope I have something that's worth writing about. So, you be the judge. Hopefully we did. But, unfortunately, Frank's not here. I wish he was. But he really pointed me in the right direction in a lot of ways back then. And he probably didn't even know it at the time, but he did.
So, Maria, did you know of the Lisa Todd case before writing this book?
No, I had no idea about Lisa Todd until Chris had mentioned it during one of our meetings, and he very casually mentioned that he was doing a podcast about publisher Jane Doe, who had not been identified at the time. And so we were like, okay, yes, let's definitely put this in the book. It really touched me, the case. We put it in there, and it was just an amazing experience to see how it unfolded literally before our very eyes, and timely with the book. So it was very cool to see and experience that.
So before I ask this next question, I'll say to the audience, because this will throw you off like it threw me off, and I had to ask the question. You guys have to understand that this book was written in real time. So that means Chris was still very active at the time. There's things going on and things evolve in the book. So the beginning of the book, it says that he's going to retire in January of 2023. You heard me at the beginning say he has already retired. They do tie that up if you get to the ending of the book, because that leads to this question. Now, one of the cases that you wanted to crack, Chris, was Tracy Byrd. If you guys aren't familiar with that, Tracy went missing March 7th of 83. She was 14 when she went missing. She is still missing to this day. In the book, you say you feel you may know how to find her after now 39 years, and you wanted to do it before retirement. Were you able to do that?
I was not able to do it before retirement. There are still some wheels in motion on that, but I'd really rather not discuss the fine details of it at this time.
I certainly understand that. You call the Jane Doe starfish. What is the meaning behind that, and how did that come up?
I had been at a conference on crimes against children a couple years ago, and when during the opening ceremony, they had read a poem called the Starfish Poem. It was written by a woman named Lauren Isley. It's just a great story. And, I had talked about when I opened up some of the cold cases, I got a lot of flack from what I would call naysayers, guys that were older, what are you opening up that for? It's a dead issue, and I've, whatever, And so the starfish story, basically, in a nutshell, it's there's a beach after a big storm, and there are thousands of starfish that have been washed up on the sand. And there's this young boy going around, and he's picking up starfish, and he's throwing them back into the water. And he comes across this elderly gentleman who's, feels as though he's very wise in his years. And he says, young man, what are you doing? He says, well, I have to throw the starfish back in the water or they'll die. And the man says to him, he kind of scoffs at him and says, take a look. There's thousands of starfish on the beach. You're not going to make a difference. And with that, the boy reaches down, picks up a starfish, throws it in the water, and he says, I made a difference to that one. So that really moved me, that story, as simple as it is. And I thought to myself, we have these cold cases here in Bensalem, and Bensalem's a big town. It borders Philadelphia. We have our share of problems here, and I'm not knocking the city of Philadelphia, but they have, their crime rate is really high. And but I was of the mindset that we don't have enough crime here where we should just leave these cases sitting. We should try everything that could be done. And those cases had been sitting, especially the Doe cases. And technology had been getting better and better. And, I wanted to dust them off and start using modern technology, which back in 2002, I was putting them on the internet. There was various websites that, discussed cold cases. I wanted to get them out there, so I did everything I could. I got grant money, and I did what was called the President's DNA Initiative, and I was able to get the publisher Jane Doe bones. I was able to get them sent to the Center for Human Identification, where they extracted a DNA profile and uploaded it into the CODIS system, so that in the event any family members of a missing person were to put their DNA into the system, it would get a match. Just something as simple as that. Now, I did the same thing for what we refer to as the clubhouse diner, Jane Doe, the Jane Doe that was found behind the diner. We exhumed her body to do that. So that was something I'd never done before. And same thing, we got her DNA and put it into the system. I was trying to keep up with the times rather than let the cases just sit there and continue collecting dust.
Now, Maria, as a writer, having to read some of these cases, which to me, all of them are heartbreaking in their own way. Did this have an effect on you personally and professionally? And if so, how?
It definitely had a personal effect on me, because I am a mother of 3 daughters. And especially being that these cases in particular that are in the book, their bodies were found in the 1990s and 80s. It just makes you really take a hard look at the world, and at the human capacity of hurt and violence and aggressiveness, and how cruel and savage some people are. I teach my children every day to be kind, kindness, and to treat others as they would want to be treated, but also caution and strength, and keeping your eyes open, because there are people that want to hurt, that want to hunt innocent people.
To be honest, I was born in 72, so I was raised in the 80s and 90s. I lived through the whole entire Atlanta child murder era and all those things. Even though I haven't heard of some of these cases, I was alive here now. But it is true that as parents, I think we shape the way we raise our kids based on what we went through or saw as a younger person. Mm-hmm. I have 3 daughters as well. I have 6 total children, 3 daughters, 3 sons. My youngest son, who's 13, now with this whole age of the internet, he always tells me and his mom, "You're being way overprotective." Because I'm like, I didn't know who you're talking to. I need to see what's going on. And it's because I come out of the era where kidnappings became very prevalent.
Yes.
And people was just disappearing left and right, and nobody's found. And I mean, look at Tracy Byrd. She's still gone since 83.
Yes.
And so it did change me as I was growing up, as how I would raise my kids, what I would tell them, how I would keep them close to the vest. It makes me nervous when I go into a store and I see a parent goes, "Yeah, just go over there and play with the iPads in the store." No, you don't know who's over at the iPads. You should be having your kid close to you.
Yes.
So I totally do feel that. Chris, these missing person cases, is these some of the hardest cases that you've had to ever work on in your career?
Yeah, they were really heartbreaking, because, in this case, both, these young ladies, they died and they were forgotten, and then they were discovered and they were basically forgotten again. And I just, to me, to give them back their name was a big thing. And a friend of mine, the other podcast I did, she had summed it up nicely. She had said that it's like when you give somebody their name back, it's like pouring their soul back into them. And I really thought that, because I said, nobody deserves to be in a pauper's grave with John or Jane Doe as the grave marker. And I for the 19 and 20 years that I was working on those cases, I used to say it all the time: somebody has got to be missing these girls. I couldn't believe that there wasn't somebody missing them, and there was a lot of people missing both of them. And despite what was in the media from time to time, the dots were never connected.
Have you ever gotten a chance to meet any of the family of any of the cases that you solved?
Of the Does, yes, I have. I actually went to Lisa Todd's funeral.
What was that like for you?
That was, my wife was with me. It was a cremation, and they had her in an urn, but the urn had the name Lisa Todd on it. And, for me to see that, 19 years, it was a good feeling that, she was home. I mean, in a sense, she had a son who was about 3 years old when she disappeared. And I had, we developed a good rapport, and he had thought his entire life that his mother had abandoned him. And clearly she had not. And, he lives out of state, but, he came up here and I met him, and, he was he was grateful, that she wasn't forgotten. And that, to me, that was worth it, to just give this young guy some closure that, your mom didn't run away, something terrible happened, but at least now So yeah, the funeral was somewhat emotional. It gave me closure too, in a sense, Yeah,
I know over my time doing some cases of disappearances, and when people's found, at the end I always say the good thing that came out of this case is that person was found and was able to be laid to rest, and They had their name.
Right.
And somebody wrote me and said that they felt like that statement that I made was unheartful. I'm like, no, it's what I'm meaning is we bury so many people that we don't know. Mm-hmm. And for that parent to know what exactly happened, even though they don't know all the details, they have their kid back. Yeah. And as a parent, God forbid, if anything happened to me like that, that's where I would want to be. Can we at least find my child? I just recently did the case of Vanessa Guillen. She was a soldier that ended up getting killed in Fort Hood, and her mother couldn't see her. And it was always heartbreaking to me because of the way in which she was killed. They had her, but she couldn't have an open casket. And they kept it for her for 2 months in fear that she would have a heart attack if she knew what the truth was. So I always feel when it comes to those cases. And I do thank you for continuing to do that, because somebody has to care. And just looking at you, I know nobody can see you, but I can see it all in your face that even now it still wells you up. So you very much care. And it takes somebody to care enough to want to do that, even if you're not the person directly affected. Now, I did read that even though you're not retired, that you only semi-retired because you are going to take an administrative position in the sheriff's department. Is that true? And have you already done that?
That is true. I've been working there since late March, so I had about a 3-week retirement. But I enjoy it up there, and they're treating me very good.
Is the reason you didn't fully retire, do you feel like you still have more you want to do, or because it's been so ingrained in your life, you just can't walk away right now?
I retired from Ben Salem March 7th, and I started at the sheriff's office on March 29th, so I had 3 weeks, and I literally went crazy, out of my mind, bored with nothing to do. Maria's shaking her head because she's heard the story. My wife is in the other room shaking her head. And it's the truth. I'm 52. I still got a lot of gas in the tank. I'm not, I wanted to do more, and this opportunity came up, and I'm working on starting up a nonprofit organization to assist in these types of cases. So even if I'm not, a detective on the front lines, when there's cases that need funding for genetic research and genealogy, that's where I hopefully can come in.
I'm starting to believe that when I talk to a detective or an investigator or just a plain cop, you guys never really retire. Paul Holes wrote his book earlier this year, and he said he's retiring, but I see him on my TV every day.
Okay.
So he retired from being a cop after the Golden State Killer thing, so to speak, but now he's an advisor and working on cold cases. So I'm like, you guys never retire.
Yeah, well, they broke the door wide open with the DNA genealogy on that case.
Right. So, Maria, with me looking at Chris right now, you guys have had several meetings over the course of writing this book, just seeing the emotion that wells up in his face just from asking him certain questions. I'm sure you've seen this before, and did that put more pressure on you to make sure that this book was as accurate and right as possible?
Yes, of course. I definitely wanted to portray and reflect all of Chris's emotion and all of his hard work that he's done to give back to these families and that he's poured into his victims, and do it justice. I didn't want to be accurate. I might have asked him the same question like 10 times sometimes, but I just wanted it to be accurate and true. And, hopefully I did that.
I certainly would say that you did.
Thank you.
Chris, I wonder, so with you being the detective, you're dealing into these cold cases, I know it's had to have an effect on you personally and professionally. How does your wife deal with all of that, with the hours that you're gone and things of that nature? How have she dealt with it over the years?
She was a very good sport about it. My wife and I, when we met at the time, she was an assistant district attorney in an adjoining county, so she understood. It was just nice that she understood, and I would when she would leave at work at 5 o'clock in the morning because she was getting ready to have a trial. I understood that, so we've kind of helped each other out in that aspect.
I think it made it work to your benefit too, as well, because she's obviously in law enforcement too, right? So she's seeing things on her end and you're seeing things on your end, and you guys can talk about that as much as possible. But it's not like some of the stories I read where the person that came into it, they had nothing to do with it at all, and then the marriage crumbles. I'm sure it is hard. I'm not a cop at all. I've been married 20 years and it's still a marathon. So I want to say congratulations to you and your wife, for being able to stick that out.
Thank you.
So I do want to ask you about a couple of cases, being that you are now an officer. I still consider you an officer, though you're retired. Maria, have you heard of these cases? Everything you want to say, please chime in. But I've always wanted to ask these questions because I've done these cases and one I just redone. So I think I asked you at the beginning, I asked you again about the Christopher Dorner case. Just to refresh your memory, Christopher Dorner in 2013, he was a Los Angeles Police Department cop. Upon coming in as a rookie, he had shared with his training officer that he planned on suing the LAPD when he got out of probation period because of something that happened to him with his partner at the time, and nobody ever did anything about it. Going forward, he witnessed this training officer brutally kick a suspect in the face and in the chest to where he was bruised. He pretty much ratted her out and told his higher-ups he was fired. His name has been dragged through the mud. They said that he was lying because she had gave him an evaluation that said he needed to up his game. So that led to a manifesto that was 11,000 words long that dictated he was going to go after law enforcement. He also dictated in there that because he crossed the blue line, that now they were trying to oust him, gave LAPD about 24 hours to respond to clear up his name, and that didn't happen, so he went on a shooting spree of LAPD. If you've heard of this case, do you feel that the Los Angeles Police Department did anything that was wrong because they didn't respond to him? They did not take him seriously until after he fired the first shot. And then by that time, it was too late.
He wanted an answer within 24 hours and he didn't get it, correct?
Right. He said that he just wanted them to publicly go on and state that he did not lie, that Teresa Evans did actually kick this guy in the face. Now, understand, he testified. He was bruised up. His dad even said, he told me that a cop kicked him. But when he got to testify, he changed his story. So he says, if you guys tell me this in 24 hours, I won't do anything. It'll be done. But they didn't move till he fired the first bullet.
Wow. No, I mean, hindsight is 20/20, but I'm not going to, obviously they didn't believe him, I guess. That's, the whole thing is tragic and unfortunate.
Maria, have you heard of this case before?
Very vaguely do I remember it. So I don't know enough to speak to this case individually, but I just feel like in the adult world, it's harder for adults sometimes to take things seriously. And not speaking for the LAPD, but they must get thousands, like probably hundreds of threats. And who knows that, that they're just threats. So maybe a boy who cried wolf type of situation possibly could have, caused them not to act so seriously upon it. But not that that makes it right. I feel like everybody really just needs to act on any threats of violence, the same as the schools do. I mean, the school systems have been unfortunate with having to face violence and acts of violence and threats. And so those need to be taken just as seriously, across the board, whether it be, law enforcement, hospitals. There's violence within the hospital environment. I know that. I still work as a nurse, and I actually encountered a very near shooter, type of situation a few weeks back. So against another employee. So you can always speak about what you would do in situations like that, but when that time comes, it really needs to be taken seriously.
If you ever hear my episode, which I'll send you guys the link to it if you guys want to hear it, my stance has always been, first of all, I do not condone any murder of any kind. I don't condone what Christopher Dorner did. I wish that he would have done it in a different way because, so my wife said, what would you do in the situation? I agree with you, Maria. We can't always just jump up and act on every act. But when you write an 11,000 word manifesto and you name each person and you tell me that they don't feel like the cops has changed since the Rampart and Rodney King days, and he goes through, I'm going to target you, I'm going to target your family, and then he says, I'm bringing war to the LAPD. At that point, I think I'm saying, all right, look, this guy may be serious. Let's start moving people the hell out. And that's where I would have been.
Right. Yes.
But to go along with that, they made some mistakes that cost us in California $5 million. Because my daughter said, well, do you think if he would have came out peacefully that they would have took? I said, no, they would have killed him. And these things proved it. They shot up a truck of 2 women who were delivering papers because they thought it was him. 102 bullets. They didn't make any announcements at all to say who they were, nothing. They shot up another truck in Torrance County, same way. Dude, that guy didn't get hit, but they still had to pay him $1.2 million. So $5 million over all that course because of that. But I asked you that, Chris, because not to throw you under the bus, but just to see where your mind was as a detective. I talked to a couple of my friends that are cops. Some admit to me there's a blue line. Some admit to me there's not. As a civilian, I've always believed that there was. In his case, and I'm not saying there is one everywhere, so I'm not saying every cop is bad. But in this case, just from what he wrote, it kind of proved that woman is still on the force to this day. And she was promoted to a lieutenant right after all this happened. And Charlie Beck is still down here. He's one of the chief of police now. And they released a whole entire documentary about how bad Christopher Dorner was, but they never said anything about what they had done. So I just wanted to bring that up to an actual detective, see how you felt about that. What do you want people to get out of 3 Decades Cold, Chris, when they read it?
I think what I'd like them to see is that, when you just shouldn't give up on something if you believe in it. I believe that the Barbara Rowan case was solvable, and I sure as hell wanted it solved, and I know her family did. Same with the Lisa Todd case and the Mary Beth case and the Tamby case. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it. And, tying it back into the Starfish story, I mean, yeah, every one of those cases I spent decades working on, a lot of time, a lot of energy, whatever, not just me, lots of people. But it was worth it. In the end, it was worth it. So because, you made that difference to those families. So you made that difference to the Starfish. You made a positive difference instead of, being a Jane Doe. She now has her name back. Unsolved cases that are, horrible cases are now solved. It's worth it.
Maria, as the writer, what do you want people to get out of the book?
Definitely everything that Chris said, and that you can relate it also to anything, hard work in general, for anything that you put your mind to in life. Perseverance, hard work through it. It doesn't have to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It took us 3 years to write this book from the start, and that's together. So it's not going to take overnight, but it's going to be worth it in the end. And the real reward is completing it. For me, that's the real reward. Like, I'm not looking for materialistic things or money. The real reward is that it's completed. It's getting published. And to show my children, be able to show my children that, look, 3 years of hard work, dedication, persevering, working through the challenges, it's complete. And it's the best feeling to know when it's complete. But I also want public to know, that these types of people are, unfortunately, this is reality. So maybe they can learn some things through reading these unfortunate stories as well, like what not to do and what, so.
Well, I think both of you've certainly enlightened my life. I do a lot of true crime. As you know, the name of the show is True Crime and Authors. And you guys have inspired me to look more into more missing persons cases. There's a lot of murder and rape and all kinds of stuff in true crime. But I don't think we spend enough time talking about those people that are missing, that are still out there, that still has a family that needs to find them. And just from the pages I've read so far, and which I will finish, and talking to you, I want to thank you for that, because it's made me, as a podcast host, more aware that what I do, I have a platform that I can push this out there. Maybe if the right ears hear it, there would be spark to say, let's relook into this case. So it's for people like yourselves why I do this show, to get stories out there that nobody else has ever heard of, cases nobody else has ever dealt with, from an actual detective who's willing to put, everything you've done over these decades on the line. And I read in the book, sometimes, you was getting teased for it, but you kept going. So just let you guys know, I thank you for that. And I appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
No, thank you.
So in closing, I'll start with you, Maria. What would you like to say to the potential readers of 3 Decades Cold?
I would like to say, keep your mind open, and I hope you enjoy the book. I hope you learn many lessons through the literature. I hope it inspires you. That is my biggest goal. My biggest goal is to inspire others in whatever way you need to be inspired, whatever your mission is. And I hope you take that home with you after reading the book. Chris, same question.
Well, I hope that they identify with it, because a lot of the references that Maria and I made. But I would say, like I was saying before about, just because something's hard, don't quit. I would say find yourself a starfish and save it.
Do you guys know where the book will be able to be bought from once it's published?
Right now, the only thing that we've been told is that it will be released as ebooks, and I'm not sure if it's going to be Amazon.
I know it's going to be on Genius's platform.
Right. So I was going to say, the one thing we do know will be on Genius Books. Very fabulous people over there. So that will definitely be the one spot you can get it from. All right, guys. Well, I do thank you both for being on the show today. This has been very enlightening. I know you guys are busy. Yes, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Thank you, David.
Yes.
I would just like to thank Genius Books as well. Thank you.
Yes, Genius Books. Without Genius Books, this interview would not be possible.
That's right.
So I want to thank them for making you guys available to me. They've been really good to me over there. Stephen and Leah, I can't say enough about them. So thank you guys as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, guys, you heard it there. That was Maria Jefferson and Chris McMullen. The book 3 Decades Cold will be released February of 2023. Make sure you get yourself a copy of that. Genius Books for sure. Follow me on all social media. I will be publishing or posting that when it comes out as well. You do not want to sleep on this book. It is going to be a great one. All right, guys, so thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys are being safe out there. And as always, remember these things. Always stay humbled. A little love and compassion goes a long way. And this is the podcast where 2 passions becomes 1. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. One link to the link tree has it all. Feel free to drop us a line at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Arslan. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild and David McClam. Theme music, Legendary, by New Alchemist. Introduction and ending credits by Jackie Voice. See you next time on True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People.